at 1:30, I'm going to be going live for a summer series of leadership practical tips. And today I'm going to be sharing 3 practical ideas that you can start to use straight away. So, a little bit about my background. I'm a leadership consultant. I specialize in helping IT leaders in law firms develop confident leadership skills and build high performing teams. And I do that in 3 main ways: one to one coaching, leadership development programs, and team building workshops. And my background is more than 25 years working in professional services, former global head of IT service in a top 10 law firm, and I've been working on in my own independent practice since 2012, so 14 years now. And outside of work, I'm a cyclist, I'm a runner, I'm a dog sitter, huge Northern Soul fan. And if you've been following me on LinkedIn, you'll also know that I'm doing a section of the Camino de Santiago in August, which is exciting and terrifying all at the same time. So I truly and passionately believe that high performing teams start with confident leadership. And it's the thing that all of my work is based around. I do a lot of team performance consultancy, but what I've found over the years is that when I go in to work with a team, often what I'm supporting or working or coaching or mentoring is the leader in how to develop those leadership skills and how to have confidence in their leadership skills. And it's for me, it's not about having the perfect leadership style. It's not about having all the answers. It's about developing that confident leadership. Because I think when a leader does lack confidence, it shows up in ways that often you don't even realize. What we tend to see is that when you're lacking confidence, you tend to micromanage, or they avoid difficult conversations, hold on to work instead of delegating, and sometimes it means that they become the bottleneck and they get overwhelmed and they end up working all of the hours, and then they don't have the time to think and breathe and to be more strategic. Whereas confident leaders do something different. What they do is to create an environment where people can do their best work. And that starts with building trust. And if your team doesn't trust you, it might not always be obvious, but they won't tell you when they've made a mistake. They won't challenge your thinking. They won't take ownership, and they'll wait for direction instead of taking initiative. But when there is trust in a team, everything changes. You notice that people will speak up sooner. They start to communicate more effectively. They collaborate more openly, which means that you're solving problems together but faster, and you're performing at a much higher level. Productivity increases, engagement increases. So, trust makes a huge difference to the way that a team works and performs. And so, before I get into the content itself, I just want you to take a moment and think about a time when you've had a really good manager. What was it about that manager? How much did you trust them, and why did you trust them? And normally it's not because they were technically brilliant. And if you're finding it hard to think about the best manager you've ever had, maybe think about the worst manager you've ever had, and what was it about that person? And I know personal experience, there is a manager that comes to mind who I never really felt comfortable with. I never really quite sure of what he was doing, and he was friendly, he was personable. There wasn't anything I could put my finger on, but I did sometimes feel that if I asked for resources or if I asked for additional support or additional budget, very often he'd say, yes, of course, we'll get that sorted out. But I never knew for sure whether that was going to happen. And there was, and I couldn't put my finger on it. So think about the best or the worst manager you've ever had. How much did you trust them? And what was it about that individual that made you trust or not trust them? So now I'm going to share 3 practical ways you can start building that trust with your team. Because if you've reflected on the best manager or the worst manager, you'll probably some experiences or incidents are coming to mind of how that impacted on your personal performance. So my first thing for you then is you've got to get to know your people as a leader, knowing your people outside of their job title, getting to know them as human beings. Sorry, just moving my notes out of the way so I don't forget to tell you stuff. And treating everyone equally isn't necessarily the same as treating everybody well, but I think it's so important to get to know, your business analysts, your infrastructure specialists, your info security people, your cyber security specialists. Get to know them as people first and not just as their job title. So for example, who supports Leeds United, who loves dancing, who spends their weekend running around after toddlers, who's the football fan. I remember once when I was at Arthur Anderson chatting generally in the office, and I think it must have been the World Cup was on, and I think England were due to play Sweden. It might have been the Euros. It was a long time ago now. And one person in the room had no idea what we were talking about, and he said, I don't follow football. So it's about getting to know people outside of work, but also getting to know their personality. So, what motivates them? How do they, what are their communication preferences? Who are the people that like all the details, all the bullet points? Who are the people that always want to know why we're doing something? And absolutely nothing wrong with that, but you'll find that some people won't be able to do their best work unless they know why they're doing it. Are they an introvert? Are they an extrovert? Is it somebody that in a team meeting, for example, if they're an introvert, you might want to ask them or invite them, tell me about your thoughts. Whereas maybe somebody who's very chatty and quite extroverted, you might want to ask them to give me one key idea that you've got so that you ensure that you get, the introvert's point of view as well as the extrovert's point of view. Find out about what are their ambitions, what are their aspirations, and all of this is really helpful because it enables you to deepen the empathy that you have with those people. And it's that human to human connection that we all want and we all crave. Now, I'm not asking you, I remember one manager I had who would, he noticed every time I had a new jumper on or a new top on or something I hadn't worn for ages. And noticing it once felt fine. Oh, he's noticed that I got a new Christmas present. But, it's not noticing it every single time. So this isn't about becoming your team member's best buddy, but it's about being human. And for example, if they are a football fan and maybe they follow Wolves and Wolves just got demoted, then it's like, being aware of that if you're a football fan as well. I'm not saying going out of your way to be, to comment on stuff that you don't know anything about, but it is about getting to know people as human beings first. Because that gives you, and the reason that obviously that gives you the empathy, but the reason that's important is it means that if they are a diehard Wolves fan and Wolves got demoted at the weekend, you can understand why they might be feeling a bit off colour that day. So the second thing I want to say is to tell the truth. Now, this is not just about being open, honest, and authentic, but telling the truth really matters. I think authenticity is a word that's overdone now. So it's when, for example, you're going through an organizational change, or when you know that perhaps somebody's going through a performance issue, going through performance counseling, or they're having to, they're having conversations with HR. It's about telling people the truth, but that doesn't mean to say you have to tell them everything. You can tell them what you know, you can tell them what you don't know, and you can also tell them what you can't tell them yet. So you can tell them the truth even if you can't tell them the whole truth. That's the important bit, because one of the quickest ways to really destroy trust is by pretending that you've got answers when you don't, or pretending that you don't have answers when you do. Because people can tell when you're not being open and honest, but they might not understand why you're not being open and honest. So if you're a parent and you ask your child, who dropped the cornflakes on the kitchen floor this morning, if your 3-year-old says wasn't me, from the way they talk, from their body language, whether or not it was them. And that's the thing with humans. We know when somebody's not being open and honest with us, but we don't necessarily know why. And it might be that if you're saying to people, I don't have that information, it's far better to say, I do have that information, but obviously for confidentiality reasons, I can't share that with you yet. Because if you say, I don't know, but actually you do, people will be able to just pick up on little nuances of your body language, of your tone of voice, and they'll think, oh, they're not telling me the truth. And they will make up their own story to write the truth. So that's why it's much better to tell people, the truth, tell them what you don't know, tell them what you can't tell them yet, and if you can't tell them the truth, then tell them why you can't tell them the truth. People, particularly when it's in a difficult situation, like a reorganization, or maybe somebody's going through disciplinary proceedings, people understand that you can't tell them, or you can't share everything yet. And if they don't quite understand that, then just invite them to think about if you were in the situation, if it was you that was, in a difficult situation right now, would you want everyone to know the truth? No, you wouldn't. So, people generally understand, but it's when you aren't openly honest that it creates discomfort, and people can't put their finger on it, and they'll make up a story. My third practical tip for you today is about choosing curiosity over judgment. Every leader has a split second where they get to choose whether or not to be open and curious and to ask an open question, or to go into judgment mode and say, what on earth did you do that for? That was the stupidest thing you've ever done. How you respond to bad news, how you respond when someone says, I messed up, I made a mistake, that will determine whether or not people will tell you bad news in the future. And you might think, well, I don't want them to be telling me bad news, but you do, because you want to know what's going on. You want to know when a mistake's happened. You want to know if somebody's noticed that the rollout you're about to do is not quite ready, that it didn't go through UA testing very well. So there's a really great framework that I'd encourage you to look up by Timothy C. Clark, The 4 Stages of Psychological Safety. So I just have to check my notes here to make sure I give you the right order. But he talks about inclusion safety, learner safety, contributor safety, and challenger safety. And challenger safety, I think, is particularly relevant for IT managers, because challenger safety is the stage whereby somebody feels comfortable and safe enough to disagree with you. Now you think, why would I want them to disagree with me? But if you're suggesting, let's roll out this program on X date, and they know of a reason why that's a really bad idea, or maybe they've seen that there are some glitches in the software that you've not been made aware of. If you don't have safety in the team, they're not going to feel safe to speak up and to challenge you. And that, when there is no challenger safety, that's when things go wrong when least expected. So choosing curiosity over judgment means that people will feel safe to ask questions, to speak up, to make mistakes, and importantly, own up to those mistakes, but also to challenge your decisions. Because trust isn't just about whether or not people like you, it's about whether or not they feel safe. And what I've seen in some organizations, it's not enough to say this is a safe space. You have to create a safe space by building trust and then not jumping into judgment, but choosing curiosity over judgment. I hope this has been helpful for you today. What we've covered is why trust matters, know your people, tell the truth, and choose curiosity over judgment. So before we finish today, I would love for you to think about one thing that you're taking away from this leadership live. Maybe it's something you're going to reflect on, maybe it's something you're going to look up, maybe it's something about how and when you tell the truth, maybe it's something about how you get to know your people, or maybe it's something about how you create that safe space so that people feel comfortable to challenge, and how to give yourself space and time to choose curiosity over judgment, because sometimes it's easy to jump into judgment. And then, if you've enjoyed this today, if you'd like to get more leadership and team performance insights, I encourage you to sign up to my Team Talk newsletter, which you can access here on LinkedIn. I also run a Team Talk podcast where I interview leaders in sport and other in IT directors in law firms and other experts to get their learnings and insights about how leadership determines team performance. So that goes out every couple of weeks, and you can find that on LinkedIn as well. And then the final piece that I offer that you might find interesting is the Team Culture Club, and that is I run that 5 times a year, and it's an online space where I bring peers together to talk about team culture and leadership and have some really rich, juicy conversations about what it takes to build that team culture. So, our July session was just last week, and we were talking about how to build trust when you're going through a change program, and where some people feel the old methods were working well and haven't yet bought into the new change or the new processes. So we have some really rich conversations there. And if you want to explore how we can work together so that your teams perform more effectively, please do feel free to book a call with me today at sherrybevan.co.uk/call, or just message me. So thank you for listening, and I shall be back next week. And next week, we're going to explore how to stop being the fixer of everything when you first become a leader. Speak to you soon.